if you're Nolan Arenado, you know what? It feels good to be wanted, right? So even if you have to come to Cardinals camp this weekend, hopefully when you get there, they're happy to see you. Maybe they'll give you some flowers. I don't know. But it looks like he's coming, I guess. So do Cardinals fans want him here? Because you may not have a choice in the matter, but the saga has unfolded in such a way that we might be nearing at least the conclusion of like stage one. Who knows if maybe down the road this picks up more steam. Maybe at the deadline, July, Andy. I don't know. But down here in camp, Cardinals camp, it really seems like everybody is, I wouldn't say bracing, but because that has a negative connotation, but everybody's ready for Arenado to get here either tomorrow or Sunday, seems to be the expectation.
And look, I can understand how Cardinals fans can view this as just a negative because the front office has told you basically from the jump this offseason, yeah, it's a guy we're probably going to need to move. And I think people have been so fed up with this front office, with how things have gone recently, that, you know, anything that they do wrong, even if it's getting rid of a player that I think is still pretty well liked by Cardinals Nation, even the effort in getting rid of that player going south is something that just is a sour taste in the mouth of Cardinals fans sometimes. Like, oh, well, they can't even execute this goal. They can't even be bad and do everything that it takes to be a young team. They can't even do that. And look, I understand it, but we're talking about a player that's still pretty good, we think, even though he, after a down year by his standards, I think we can also view that through that lens. Like, yeah, it was a bad year for Nolan Arenado. Was it a good year for the average MLB player? And if he's anything higher than that, then that's a plus for the Cardinals production-wise. But that's kind of the back and forth that I think is very interesting with this discussion of whether Cardinals fans really do want Nolan Arenado to stay with this team.
Yeah, if Cardinals fans are mad that he's probably going to be showing up in Jupiter, Florida tomorrow or Sunday, then the front office did a really good job of convincing them that the offseason goals that it had were worthy goals, because they told everybody in like October, hey, we're looking to move some contracts, and then it comes out Wilson Contreras wants to stay. Sonny Gray wants to stay. And that was it. They didn't say anything about Arenado. So it was like, yeah, okay, I guess that's the guy you're trying to move. And then in the weeks and months since, John Mozeliak has been even more specific. Andy, at one point, I believe it was winter warm-up just a few weeks ago, John Mozeliak called it priority 1, 2, and 3 of the Cardinals offseason to trade Nolan Arenado.
Well,
so, like, yeah, they really wanted to do this, but now that we're so close to him potentially reporting to camp in a world where they were unable to trade him, and that may remain the case, as a Cardinals fan, do you look at this and go, wait a second, I didn't want them to trade Nolan Arenado in the first place. He's a pretty good player, and he might help them win more games this year if he's here. I think a lot of Cardinals fans have bought in, though, to the notion of play the young guys. And you look at somebody like Nolan Gorman, who could be impacted, Alec Burleson, who could be impacted, Ivan Herrera. There's a lot of guys aged, 23 to 25 or so in Cardinals camp right now that are going to see their opportunity trimmed, at least on paper, by the presence of Nolan Arenado. But like that, why should people really care a lot about that? Isn't it okay to have more good players than fewer good players? That's right. Kind of what we've always said. Don't worry about the position. Don't get caught up in mid-February with where's everybody going to play. And maybe I'm wrong. And if I am, text in, call in, tell me I'm wrong. But I remember last spring when the Cardinals signed Brandon Crawford and we all started doing some math and we were like, does Alec Burleson even have a spot on the bench? Is he going to start the year in Memphis? We were counting. But then what happens? A couple guys get injured, and by the end of the season, Alec Burleson was their number 2 hitter, and he played a ton. So, like, should we get too caught up in the on-paper of it right now? Or if you're a Cardinals fan, do you just say, you know what, the details are going to be the details, and over the next 6 weeks of camp, they'll work themselves out? But maybe it's okay to have Nolan Arenado, a motivated Nolan Arenado, no less. Someone that knows he didn't perform to his own personal standards last year, and that guy shows up in camp. Is that a good thing? I think a lot of Cardinals fans can wrap their minds around the idea that it might be. But it also, to your point, Andy, the front office is struggling with a goal that maybe I didn't even agree with it being a goal, but they still can't even accomplish it. Yeah. So do I have faith in the front office to be able to accomplish some of the other things they're telling us they want to do? I think that's part of the sentiment as well with this.
Well, and again, it's a move that because they're calling it such a high priority and all of the words that have been spouted about this move potentially affecting their season, like they can't do anything else to improve their team until they do this. And that's the other part of it, because they probably do want to field as good of a winning team as they can. But they also know that they have to develop some guys. So they want to do that while also having room to get some other ancillary pieces, maybe to help the bullpen a little bit so that you have some semblance of a competitive group there.
Yeah, the bullpen would probably be the one area that you would say, had Arenado been dealt 6 weeks ago, or even going all the way back to whenever that was in December where he nixed the deal to Houston. If it had happened then, do the Cardinals, between that point and today, have they made a move to address the bullpen in more of a meaningful way than like Nick Anderson? I like the Nick Anderson signing. I saw him throw just a bullpen side session the other day. He'll be on the schedule here soon, probably this weekend, to face hitters at some point. But they probably do something a little bit bigger than a guy that coming off of an injury with the Royals, minor league contract, invite to spring. Hey, if he makes the team, give him $1 million. Like they could have signed somebody to a 1 year or 2 year deal with maybe a little bit of like $5 million AAV, something with a little bit more cachet. And yeah, if Arenado had been dealt back then in December, that probably would have happened by now. But you know what? I don't even get the sense that whether Arenado somehow, a Dodgers type of team comes out of the woodwork and picks him up, or he reports to camp tomorrow, I think the Cardinals are pretty well done. And Andy, I think they're the only team in MLB that didn't spend a dime in free agency. Like, in terms of major league 40-man roster acquisitions, which is maybe unfair. If John Mozeliak were on the show today, he would say, now, technically, Michael Hellman, we acquired Hellman via acquisition. It was a trade of cash for the player. That's a dime.
Some money,
Undisclosed amount of money for Hellman. I
spent time making this deal happen, and time is money. So I did spend money on this deal.
So you're right again. He's right twice.
Yeah.
But no, like in terms of free agency, they didn't. They opted out of free agency this year.
Yeah.
That being said, like, all right, and I'm going to say this, and people are going to throw up in their mouth a little bit. But is it getting Nolan Arenado to report to camp kind of like making a trade? You thought you weren't going to have him, and now you do.
And now he's back.
It's a bonus, Arenado.
Oh, he's back. It's like a trade deadline
it's just
deal.
Like making a trade.
Got back from injury. Yay!
If I'm not the first person to make that joke today, I apologize.
Man.
But if I am the first one, I'm going to have to tweet it real quick because that's funny. But I think the Cardinals are like, they're going to be a decent team. They won 83 games last year.
Yeah.
Look at what they lost. We can play this game again. Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, I believe both are still floating out there in free agency. Not floating because I don't think they're in like a body of water, but they're hanging out, waiting to be signed, whatever their future may hold. Keenan Middleton, they let go. He never threw a pitch. Kittredge was a legit loss. That was, and to your point, like the bullpen is where you might have hoped to see them beef up a little bit more than they have, but they haven't done a thing because of the Arenado deal and that sort of hanging over their heads. They wanted to trim payroll. Maybe they could have moved some of that money and brought a reliever in with some of the excess and been okay. But it's like, this rotation is going to be guys that they had last year. Plus there's a McGreevy knocking on the door. Plus there's a Quinn Matthews knocking on the door. Maybe a Tink Hence knocking on the door as you get further into the summer. Like, could the rotation find a way with internal options to be about what it was last year? I'm not guaranteeing it, but it could happen. And then offensively, like, you think Jordan Walker is going to just completely bust? I don't. I think some of these guys are going to be better. Nolan Gorman, he's motivated. Talked to him this morning. I think this is a group that, like, why can't they win as a baseline, like 78 games, and then build from there with guys rising above their station? Having Arenado as part of that is your window, Cardinals fans, into potentially winning enough games to keep things interesting this summer if he's motivated and comes at the ready. That's my stance. I I think the Cardinals really wanted to make the move, but when you really dive into it, was it more for the benefit of ownership than anybody else? You can make that case.
Right? The fact that they're trying
to save money.
Yeah.
That's all it would have been. And now you have Arenado instead, which is like, if you're watching this Cardinals baseball team, if you devote, Andy, Cardinals fans, we know they're a rabid bunch. You watch 162 or you listen on KTGR to 162. Wouldn't you rather be listening to Arenado scooping it up at third and batting in the middle of the order? I think the answer is yes, but unless people are just so tired of the way that this process has played out, maybe you feel differently, but you can call or text us to let us know. That's kind of what we want to know today.
And there's probably still a section of fans out there that are saying, well, Arenado's washed now because he had that one bad year, and it's not the same year that he had been having beforehand, which were very good years, by the way, and he has one that's below that high standard. And
he's borderline Hall of Fame.
Right.
He's a really good player with a really good track record. What would you put the over-under on OPS for him this year?
This year?
Coming up. It was low 700s last year. He had a very down year, and I think even by like the league standard, he was basically plumb league average, a 101 OPS plus with a 719 OPS. His career OPS is 857.
Yeah.
And as recently as 2022, when he came, third to Goldie in the MVP race? He was right there at the end of it. He had an 891. That was just, it's been 2 seasons since that. We're going into year number 3. Where would you set the over-under on his OPS this year? Let's say if he stays with the Cardinals. Let's assume he's still playing half his games at Busch, but where would you set that number after a 719 last year?
I'm going to set it at 745.
I was going to try to read your mind and have you say 749, but that's really close.
Right.
I
think it's around there.
I'll take 750 for Arenado this year. If that puts me on a limb, then it does. But I'll take that. I'll take that play. Yeah.
He's only had 3 seasons below that number in his career. And I get
if I'm not mistaken, one of them the COVID year that was just kind of a weird one.
You're right. Yeah, the COVID year and his rookie year, and then last year. That's it.
Yeah, dude. I am going to take him to bounce back. Now, granted, 2023, which was the year the Cardinals were really rough, they lost 91 games. He had a 774 OPS. That's
still good.
That might be about right, though. That's still an above-average player. It's not vintage Arenado. But how many guys on the Cardinals this year are going to have better than that? Better than a 774 OPS? Maybe a couple. But a lot of them, I think, will probably be in that range, 760, 750, 740. But I think 1 through 9, you've got a bunch of guys. Like if a name like Ivan Herrera is your 7th or 8th best hitter, I think there's a chance if they stay healthy, knock on wood, that it's a pretty deep group of position players this year. Maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid and you can yell at me if you feel like I am. But this is a team that, and I mentioned what they lost from their pitching staff, Andy, and how they might be able to replicate that. Kittredge, yeah, they're going to have a Riley O'Brien step up. Maybe it's a Nick Anderson that steps up. Maybe Ryan Fernandez takes on more of that load. Position players, they lost Goldie. What was Goldie's OPS last year? Basically the same as Arenado's.
Yeah.
They're putting Contreras at first, and in theory, giving more at-bats to Ivan Herrera, giving more at-bats to a Burleson. Their offense shouldn't be worse than it was last year. It should frankly be better, because if Gorman is struggling and he's in AAA for half the year and Walker the same, something's gone terribly wrong. This Cardinals team, as it's constructed, is basically what it was last year, and that makes people upset because they're like, well, you told us it was going to be play the young guys. Well, they do have enough young guys that if those guys can get their footing and play well, there's a world in which you'll be glad you had Arenado, because you might not be as bad as a lot of people think. Payroll's lower, but is the team a lot worse? Again, I think in that clubhouse, they would answer that question with a resounding no.
875-KTGR, do you want Nolan Arenado to stay with St. Louis despite the team's efforts to find a trade partner for him? What you got?
What's your answer to that question?
Well, I say
you want him to stay.
So I would like for him to stay. I get the whole save payroll, everything like that, and it makes you have some moves here and there that you could marginally make your team better with.
It's a good Jedi mind trick if we're basically saying for ownership to save money makes us happy as fans.
Yeah, again, that mind trick has worked across all fan bases in America when it comes to that. In all sports. Does not matter the sport. So I get that. And it does, I think, make them a little bit better offense. And again, if you want this team to compete, I think Arenado on the team with a better year than he had last year, like with a more average year to what we have known Arenado to have, that's a plus for the Cardinals. I think we can very clearly agree on that. The question is, how much better then does that make the offense? Like to be a competitive team? I mean, I don't know, because you're still going to have to see steps forward from like 2 to 3 other guys out there. It wasn't just the fact that Arenado and Goldschmidt were struggling. That was the biggest reason why the offense sputtered out.
It was the young guys that they're about to rely on, too, though, not meeting the hopes or the expectations. But let me ask you this, and I'll give my answer to do I want. I'm not a Cardinal fan. I write about the team, but I'll still answer the question of whether I want Arenado to be on this team. But first, let me ask you this. Nolan Gorman last year had to go down to Memphis, obviously underperformed, wasn't just really slumped a lot to where it just, and he even said this morning, maybe going to Memphis was the best thing for him to get that kind of reset. And we'll see what he does this year. Do you think he will be better than last year, Nolan Gorman? Doesn't have to be substantially so, but will he be better or worse than last year?
Well, it almost depends on how much he plays, but
fair.
But I'm going to say no.
He's going to be their. So let me say this. Gorman's going to probably DH a bunch if Arenado's on this team. Would you say better or worse than last year for Gorman, or it's going to be about the same? It's going to be a struggle.
And his OPS was what? It was down there, wasn't it?
Buddy, it might have been in the 5s.
Okay, so maybe a little bit better. But
no, I'm wrong. It was 671. It feels worse. It felt worse than that because they demoted him.
Right.
But it was like he started kind of strong and then really tapered off. 671 though, higher or lower for Gorman?
I don't think it's higher than that.
That's fair. Hey, you don't have to answer higher.
I don't think it's that much higher. That's the problem I have, is that some of these players here that we're talking about, okay, will they be a little bit better? Probably, but is that enough to make this an offense to where it's supposed to be, where we also saw pitching issues because
if the pitching is worse, you didn't really gain anything. If the pitching is worse,
and I think you can maybe expect it to be a little bit worse because we were not really expecting it to be all that great last year, and it ended up, exceeding the expectations, I think,
it was kind of like the rotation ERA was still like 24th or something, but it was like an acceptable 24th where it wasn't offensive. Right. It wasn't like guys were getting knocked out of the game in the 3rd inning every other day. You did okay.
But my point is, like, for this to have, for the Cardinals to have a competitive group this year with the young core that they have, it requires 3 to 4 of those players to take steps forward to the point where the offense can be the reason why you're winning games. And
kind of like the Chiefs. We said, hey, we need to maybe flip this a little bit from defense. Run prevention is, I view it this way. Rotation, lower floor, because the bottom could drop out without vets like Gibby, like Lynn. Higher ceiling, because if that opens up a door for Quinn Matthews to step into it in May, you might actually get better, but there's risk in that because you don't know if he's going to be ready.
That's the thing.
You don't know if Tink Hence is going to be ready. You don't know McGreevy, what you're going to get from him. So, definitely a lower floor, but I think the ceiling could still be there. Gorman, it's okay. You're not really sold on Gorman. Maybe he struggles again. Walker, what do you think, Jordan Walker? Is he going to improve this year?
I sure hope so, man.
The whole world agrees with you.
Seriously, it's got to happen at some point, and I feel like now's a great time for it to be happening as long as he gets the opportunity. Oh yeah, gotta be. That
was his OPS, 619.
Yeah, I think so.
Look, I'm a fan of Ollie Marmol. A lot of Cardinals fans are, they have their various thoughts. Ollie Marmol, I can see it in his eye. He believes Jordan Walker's about to bounce back. And I get it. He's the manager. He's going to tell you all the guys are about to bounce back. I'm gonna buy the Jordan Walker. We should do, honestly, a little stock up, stock down segment before the season begins to talk about what we think of these guys. I would be buying the Jordan Walker stock, though. I'm buying into what could be happening here for him. The point is, we can talk about some of these different guys. Like, I would say buying Ivan Herrera, that I think he's the guy at the plate that we saw last year. I got to see it defensively first, and so do the Cardinals. That's what people have told me is we like the guy. Can he make those strides defensively to be able to be a guy that can out-snap, for lack of a better term, using the football terminology? Can he out-snap Pedro Paez behind the plate? Can he earn those opportunities behind the plate because the pitchers trust him, the staff trusts him? Herrera, I love Pages. I think Herrera's obviously got a better upside offensively, but Pages has a little bit of that. You know what? Yadier Molina was a young catcher coming up who didn't really hit much, but he earned his way, and he turned into somebody that nobody's questioning, right? Herrera's got that upside offensively. Has he put in the work this offseason behind the plate? We're going to find that out. But all of these things are sort of the questions, and you're right. It may be, Andy, that they don't make enough strides offensively, the 4 different guys that need to do it, to offset what could be a pitching staff that comes down to earth a little bit. But they still won 83 games last year, and so if you have Arenado and you're talking about being in that 78 to 83 range, there's variance to be able to have a winning ball club this year and have Cardinal baseball, despite a lower payroll, still be something that's really compelling.
Yeah.
I think you have a better chance of that happening with Arenado on the team. That being said, to answer the question of the segment, no, I'd rather Arenado not be here. I think the Cardinals should trade him to the Cubs because it'd be funny. No, at this point, I want to see Arenado in camp, and I want to be talking to him tomorrow morning. Ideally, it's tomorrow, so I can go to the beach on Sunday. But I do think at this point I'm on board with it, and if Cardinals fans are too, I think that makes sense.